I love having a big cup of coffee in the morning, but I don't like having it all in one cup because obviously on a boat, if you spill it, you lose it all, right? So make it up in this like thermos flask thing, pour off most of it onto the bench, but then seal that bit away. That's meant to be the point of it, not how to spill your coffee in the morning. All right. But that's why we have the paper ready to go, right? So I have had now a couple days in Bermuda and I've really enjoyed myself. It's been a very, very different experience for me being here in a cruising manner. I haven't been here finishing up a course with a crew and then cleaning the boat and doing all the fix-it jobs and then getting ready for another crew to arrive and then training them, which is my normal circuit here. So I've had the opportunity to sit down and meet some of the cruisers that I've met here, and it's been so nice. There's some people who have taught me a very important lesson, which is that if I am courageous enough to break one of my own kind of walls, I guess. I find it very hard just to go up to people and go, hey, hello, how's it going? And start to chat and get into situations like that. Once we're starting to talk, I'm confident, but I find it hard. I couldn't be like a door-to-door salesman. In fact, I was a door-to-door salesman in Australia for one day and I was absolutely terrible at it. But having met them and then started to kind of move around a group of people that were all traveling together, I was able to go on board people's boats and see what it was like on their boats and hear their stories, and it was absolutely fabulous. And I was wondering if that's something that you guys would be interested in, because everybody that I met said, sure, we'll give you a tour of the boat, we'll tell you the story. And I wasn't really set up my GoPro, but I can do it another time. You know, there's lots of travel coming up and lots of sailing. So if that's something you'd be interested to see, me going on board other people's boats, finding out their stories, finding out their cruising stories and what they're about and what they're doing and how they're doing it, stick it in the comments down below, give us a thumbs up here, and I'll understand that this is a good direction for us to go. It doesn't always have to be about technical training and how to do this and how to do that on the boats I've got. Maybe we can go and visit some other people. So that was great learning in Bermuda. Bermuda, as always, has been fabulous. The people here are so kind, they're so generous with their spirit, generous with their time, and I have really, really enjoyed being here. But it is now down to the point where it's time to go. So I ended up pausing for an extra day because there's a hurricane developing down around Florida, and it's going to move up the coast towards Georgia, and then it's going to hook out and start to come across Bermuda and then on its way to the Azores, recurving to the northeast. A lot of the people that are here are going to the Azores next, so they've all been watching it, but we're going directly north out of here, so it's not going to get anywhere near us. And I did my weather routing this morning using the polar information from a Lagoon 40, which is a very different boat to this, and it says I can still easily get ahead of the system that's coming through. You know, we don't have very accurate polar data for this boat, so and also that polar data does include this using big spinnakers and all sorts of things at sea, which we're not going to use because we have got that very small autopilot out there, and we still have, and uncurably have, an issue with the solar cells. It was on and off and on and off for the last couple of days of the trip there. Some real brilliant moments where it all came back on, but I've concluded that yes, there is an issue with those junction boxes on the solar panels, but it is that they are not connected to the solar panels properly anymore and that is beyond my ability to put back together at sea. So we just don't have that much solar charging. So I've tanked up with 80 litres of gasoline, which will get me a lot of hours on that little engine. And the little outboard engine there, we've now wired that into the boat. It's got 3 wires because what's inside this wire is the negative and these 2 guys are the positive. So I'm trying to get as much cross-section of the wiring as possible to transfer load, even though I've only got thin bits of wire. Just use multiple ones. It's most important to be able to transfer amperage down a wire. You need to have as much cross-section as possible. The outboard's only putting out like 3 amps, so that's not going to be a problem for that to be carried down these wires, and it's been successful. So we now have the ability to motor and charge the boat. So batteries are still low, charging is still somewhat dodgy, but in my back pocket I have the fact that I have a fully charged lithium iron phosphate 200 amp hour battery sitting in the back there, which I can just chuck in and kind of add into this system, or in fact run the boat off. So we can definitely do 2 days on the batteries we've got, even if there was no charging. We can definitely do another 2 days on the batteries that I've got down the back of the boat, the lithium iron phosphate ones, and I've got the motor which can provide a lot of amp hours in charging, a lot of watts of charging. So it's between those we can definitely do a 4-day trip to Boston. So feeling pretty confident. Sun's just coming up out of here. It's been very persistent, the wind here, for the last couple of days that I've been here. Overall, they tell me that the weather pattern is from the southwest in Bermuda, like most of the time, and obviously they're open to just what's going on in the ocean. It's not that there's continental weather patterns really that are throwing off things locally. It's whatever's happening in the Atlantic is happening in Bermuda. So they're going to be affected by the wind up to this hurricane that's coming in the next it'll hit them in the next couple of days. So it's the right time for me to get out of here. I've had a very comfy stay here at Bermuda Yacht Services, but I'm pushed up against the dock here, and it'd be tricky for me to get anywhere else. I guess in the event of a hurricane and it was blowing this direction, I'd try and get myself inside there, but there's very minimal ability to move this boat into tricky parking spots, and well, I guess I'd go on anchor, wouldn't I? Yeah, I suppose I'd go on anchor is the other way of doing it. On anchor in a trimaran in a hurricane. Yeah, okay, I have to think about that a little bit. But today's going to be about going over to the customs. They open at 8 o'clock. We're going to get a couple more groceries. Boat's fully stacked with water, it's fully stacked with fuel. Most of the food is on board, 90% of the food's on board already. I've got 90% of the jobs done, or 10% of a bigger list, depending on how you look at it. 90% of the things that have to be done, but only 10% of the things that should be done. But that 90 and that 10 are 100% together, so feeling good with that. I've got to click the front back on here, I just realized, but this is all back together again. We don't have our Millennium Falcon situation happening here. We've got the cable, so feeling pretty good. Okay, so I've got a little job that I was just about to do here, and I'm learning that I should include you in these, even the smaller things, right? So I've got a reef line here, which is pretty heavily chafed. The chafe position at the moment will be just down by the base of the boom. Let's have a quick look, you'll see what I mean. See this guy? So it's a double braid rope, it's not Dyneema or anything. It's taking 50% of the strain with the outer sheath and 50% with the core, and it's soft stuff, and it's ended up chafing in there originally, and then this got adjusted a little bit to lift it up to get a better fair lead down to here, but the chafe remains. So we want to get that swapped out. The best way of doing that is to have that chafe not be part of the system. We're going to stitch the exterior sheath back onto the core so the rope's usable, but we don't want it to be in the system if we can possibly help it. So the first part of that is to disconnect take the line out of the boat, put in a little runner line, little mouse line like this, and that means we're going to have to pull the mouse line into position. So this is the piece of rope which I have. It has a piece of painter's tape around the end of it. I say 10% of all the things that we should be doing have been done, but 90% of the important things have been done. So, you know, there's still a few gaps. So this kind of thing's not completely cool. So we've got to come up with a solution to pull this through, because if we try and express our way through this, it's probably just gonna separate inside the boom, and then we're gonna have an hour trying to get this line back down the boom using, I think when we were in Antigua, Peter, who was the delivery skipper for this boat, had worked out a very canny method of using the very long tiller extension that we've got, which is about 3 meters long, and extending that out so it's like 4 meters long, and then pushing that down the boom to try and push a line through and put a mouse in. And that's going to take a long time. So if we had like 15 minutes that we could put in now, we'd actually be ahead by 45 minutes. So goes the theory. So we can do a quick whipping on the end of this line. Let me see if I've got myself organized. If I've got some scissors here, we're doing okay. Scissors. Oh yeah, we have. Oh, we got scissors or dividers, so decide which one thinks more useful. So we've got a very basic sewing setup on this boat. We've got a leather sailor's palm. This is absolutely essential for any kind of work you're going to be doing. If it's canvas work, sail work, rope work, this is absolutely essential. And then we've got some twine here, little rod line twine, you get in different colors, and we've got a number 7 needle. So we've got all the elements that we need to do well, some pretty serious repairs on a boat. So we take a fathom of line. There's no point cutting really anything less than. You're going to end up using it somewhere, even if it's a couple of small jobs. But for doing one good whipping, you need about half of this amount. We double it through the needle, and we don't need to worry about putting a knot in the end of it. That's not important. What you can do is, I'm not even going to try and take this. Is this melted? I was going to say, should we take this off on it? Let's just leave the tape there, and we'll make a new whipping below it, and we'll sacrifice an inch of line to the gods. So the thing when you're putting a whipping into the end of a piece of rope is you got to imagine, like, once you've finished and you walk away from it and it has 10 years in the boat, what's the kind of life that it's leading? It's not kind of a, you know, existential question for this piece of rope, but it's going to get bashed up against things and twizzled around, and your whipping on the end of it is right on the end of the rope. So if you've done something which is not too tight, it'll just fall off the end, it'll unravel again. If you do something that's super tight, that can be just as good, but if you don't do the construction in the right method, it'll just come off later, because it's on the kind of tapered end of a line, and when any kind of movement occurs in the sheath relative to the core, it all kind of gets milked down towards the end, as it often does when things are going through winches, going through blocks, going through jammers. It starts to milk a little bit. If you haven't got a good whipping on the end, the sheath will just kind of start to milk the whipping off the end, right? And even though you've got stitches going through the core, you're at the very end of the fibers, so even though your stitch goes through them, it'll just pass out through the end of the fibers. It's so easy to do that. So we start out, let's get the thing on my head and we can see how to do it.
Okay, well, let's just talk through this as I'm doing it, and I'll warn you now, this is about 5 minutes long and I haven't edited it. I realized, like, I watched hundreds of these being done as a method of learning it for myself, and I didn't have someone editing it down so it was in a more digestible form. Maybe I could fit it into a YouTube short while I was sitting on the toilet. I sat at a more experienced rigger's knee and watched them doing it, and had the opportunity to ask a couple of questions, which polite conversation allows for, and the rest of it I had to work it out myself. And I think the key thing with this is that it's good to see, like, my hands and the way that I'm kind of fiddling and messing things around, but I'm always, like, heading towards a particular place. And the particular place is, what am I doing this for? Are we just wrapping little bits of string around the ends of our rope for neatness? Because if you are, well, then fine, there's plenty of ways of doing that. Shell Booker knots will give you 5 or 6 different options that have been used traditionally. Go from there, make it beautiful. I don't think mine's going to end up being the most beautiful, but it's certainly going to be extremely functional, because what I'm aiming for all the time is to get it so that it has a long life of utility and is a benefit to me in my sailing. How is this a benefit to me? Number one, the end of the line doesn't come apart, which means that I have the usage of the end of my line whenever I want. And that might sound a little bit silly, but turn the rope around because you need to relead it the other way and it's got a frayed tail. Suddenly the usage of your line has been dropped remarkably. Both ends of the line need the ability to be pushed through things, to be led through things, to be connected to messengers, and to be used at any point at any time. The cockpit is a toolbox with winches in it, with ropes in it, with all sorts of stuff in it that you use to complete the task of sailing. So the whippings on the end of the lines are there to make sure that some little tiny red flag doesn't become a huge problem down the line. You know how it works in sailing. It's always about the accumulation of red flags. It's compounding. It's basic like economy and finance. If you allow things to compound, good things or bad things, in the end, you know, you're going to end up where you're aiming. If we have everything on the boat kind of like falling in pieces and bits of tape around the end of all the lines, you're going to get to a situation one day that the only way of getting out of trouble is to lead a line real quick, and you can't. Or you're trying to pull a line through because you really have to get that halyard back on to get that storm jib up or whatever it is, and then you're cranky method of like pulling lines through the mast is going to fail, and suddenly there's no halyard available because there's no way you can get back up the mast to solve it. You know how this goes. So the line has to have on both ends of it a way of holding it together so you can push it and pull it through things to save the rope itself, to add to the utility of the rope, make it accessible at all times. And part of that is it's going to have some kind of loop on the end of it. So as I said in the kind of preamble to this, my whippings always have little pass-throughs which go down the sides of them, which hold the whipping together, kind of create a racking effect and cinch them down onto the end of the line. And they do that by putting diagonal thrusts with the needle from the bitter end back up to the inboard end of the whipping, so to speak, the end that's away from the bitter end. God, I hate having to talk about rope. Everyone's so anal about it. You can never like say anything without anybody jumping on you for how you've described things. But you want to make it so that the thing doesn't fall off the end of the line, right? That's what we're aiming for. And it has a nice long existence. By putting these diagonal thrusts in there, it stops them coming loose and falling off the end. One thing I'd say when you're putting these whippings on is that those initial wraps, they need to be quite tight. They're securing the tail of the whipping, but also they want to allow enough room that you can get these wraps, these little sidebars into it. They're there to tighten up the whipping, but if you've already put the initial wraps on so tightly that you can barely push the needle through, you'll never get them through perfectly. So got these two sidebars on here now, whatever the proper name for those is. You can see clearly what it is I'm talking about. And then what we're going to do is move into a slightly different mode, and we're going to add a loop onto the end of this. Now, the best way to have a loop on the end of a line would be the old-fashioned method of tapering the line down, tapering it down, covering it in all this beautiful rope work that terminates in a coxcombed little nubbin on the end with a hole through it, and then you can pass a line through, because you're pulling from the very end of the line, and there's very little chance then of the line cocking to one side as you're trying to pull on it with a messenger and getting stuck behind the sheave or stuck in something in the mast, stuck in the spreader roots, whatever it is. That's not really possible though, because anything you put on the outboard end of the whipping, so to speak, the end closer to the bitter end, if you secure things there, you're going to be much more likely to have them pull off the end of the line. Remember that burnt bit that's there and that extra ½ inch of rope tail, that's going to be cut away into a nice like ½ inch maximum long frayed fluffy tail on the end of the line, because you don't want to have those hard plastic ends. If you ever get whipped in the eye by a rope, it's better to have a nice fluffy tail on the end of it, and then when it hits your eye, it doesn't do it with a hard plastic blob on the end of the rope. So we are creating now a little loop, and all I've done is pass the line through a couple times, made it into a kind of a circle going round my finger there, and then I'm just pushing the line, wrapping it round itself. It's just extra material. You know, it's not the perfect way of doing it. Kind of weaving it in perhaps would be good, but this is a kind of job that you do during a cigarette and coffee break, all right? Or yoga and an apple, if that's how you roll. It's not meant to be something that takes forever. There probably are other ways of doing this even better, but at a push, moving at speed and not worrying about anything, I can get one of these done in like a couple of minutes and then reeve a line very, very successfully. Remember, if you were to mess this up and the halyard and its messenger line becomes separated in the mast, you could add hours and hours to your day. So doing this job and doing it rather quickly and getting this done is a very reliable way of making this happen. It's not perfect because we're not pulling right from the end of the line, but of course you just wrap a bit of tape on once it's attached to the messenger, and that smooths everything down and it'll pull through 100% reliably. And you can easily put 40 or 50 pounds into pulling on that line if it does get a bit jammed up somewhere, and it won't snap. It's pretty low volume. It's not going to be a mess at the end of the line trying to deal with that thing. Just nip this off and it looks relatively aesthetic, but aiming all the way for utility, which is that it's strong, it's secure, it gives us useful utility in our rope, and makes it makes the cockpit look better, but it makes it much better toolbox, which is what it is. And ultimately what we're trying to do is sail the boat, not like, you know, polish the spanners and get all the knots perfect. What we want to do is sail the damn boat. So put everything away, have a look there, get my crappy bought from the hardware store utility knife, because I lost yet another Leatherman to the people at the airport, as always happens. And there we go, we've got a loop. We can attach it onto the messenger line. Okay, so just a quick look around. There's the boat over there behind the palm tree. This little island here used to be a ferry terminal. The customs house is down over there. And you see you can get on the inside here if you're lucky with a cruising boat, and then you're literally right next to downtown St. George's. So St. George's is not very big at all. Basically this main area is the town square. There's normally quite a lot going on here. You've got the White Horse over there, great place to drink and eat. Down this cobbled street, we're going to have a quick look. Down this cobbled street we've got some nice bars and gift shops and all sorts of things. There's a lot of what happens in Bermuda is based around the tourists that come off the cruise ships. So a lot of the industry is based around that, with gift shops and with places to eat and drink and what have you. But there's still lots of services here as well. We went into the chandlery the other day and had a look around. The chandlery in Hamilton is very, very good. I'll put some images in here now of looking around, and it really was really excellent. I can be in Bermuda for 6 months, which means I could anchor for free out here for 6 months. There are some moorings down with the yacht club, or you can come alongside at the at BYS, and there I think it was $2.25 US per foot per night. So it's not very expensive in terms of worldwide costs of coming alongside. It depends on your boat, but it's pricier than other places. But what a view! Cool. Let's go back up through here, and then if we got these steps here, East End Variety is where you come as a tourist to get the tickets for the bus to go through to other parts of the island. So once you're up on this main road up here, there we go, you go in there to get the tickets for the bus if we need them. And then this is where the bus stops in here. And this is just then the main road going through. So that's it. St. George's is quite small, but I've been here probably 20 times. I have previously been absolutely terrible at getting out of the town. It wasn't very much better this time, although I did do a good job of meeting new people and hanging out. But there are forts and beaches and all sorts of interesting stuff to go and look at literally within 10 minutes of here. So St. George's is where you have to come in and clear into Bermuda anyway. So you may as well come and enjoy this bit, and then it's about a 2-hour motor to go right round and down to Hamilton, which is otherwise, here's the bus now, otherwise it's 25 minutes on the bus to get down to Hamilton. But everybody here is so nice, so kind. They make everything really, really easy. And the exchange rate's roughly 1-to-1, so you can spend US dollars here, like over the counter. And if you tell people I'm leaving today, they'll give you a change in US dollars, so you don't have to try and explain to somebody in your local bank, you know, what a Bermudan dollar is. All right, so we're about to depart the dock now. I've just been through and seen Mrs. Burns, who's the customs officer here in Bermuda, who is a wonderful face for Bermuda and always a joy to interact with, and I mean that absolutely honestly. So off the dock here, I will talk to Bermuda Radio first, who are up on the hill over there, and say to them that I'm going to depart the dock. It's professional to do that in case they've got traffic movements here in the basin. I don't think they do, but it's good to do that. And then as I go out through the cut, then I say to them once again when we get to the end that I'm clear, and then that's my final interaction with both customs, immigration, and Bermuda Radio. So it's going to be a tricky one. You see I've got blown out fenders here. I've got ropes in to deal with that. This dock has got its own buffer, so I'm not really too worried about that, and the boat's made of Kevlar, but it's time to get off of here. Pardon me, we haven't damaged it so far on this trip. We don't want to damage it. It's going to get a bit messy. I'll put the thing on my head and we can see what happens. I won't be able to talk much, so I'll do a narration over the top, but basically I'm going to angle the wing mast, and then there's no way to spring this boat, really. I can do a little bow spring, maybe, but basically I'm going to rely on the fact that the engine is on the offside, and when we go into reverse, it'll be able to drag me away from the dock. I'll tell you right now, the wind is coming in like, now the wind's down right now, and then give it 5 minutes and it'll be back up again, so it's oscillating up and down, so there'll be a waiting period, and I think it's just about right. A tow off the dock is what a race boat normally has, and that's not happening here. So let's jump into it and see what we can make happen. I've got to get my belt on, of course. So it looks like we got another day in Bermuda fixing a problem with the bow. Yeah.